run from 8 a.m. to 9:45 a.m. Up to now, we already have 464 registered participants with 113 already in the room. We're still waiting for the rest to join us as we will officially open this event in a few minutes. To all the participants that are already here, welcome and warmest regard to you all. I hope you all join us from the beginning to the end. I am very excited to hear what discussion we will have. And in the meantime, you can also give us a follow on Instagram at TMKP Visible UGM. Subscribe to our YouTube channel with the same name and learn more of us on our website. We do have more to come that you can wait.
So did I miss the point something? No?
Vio, unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Good morning to everyone who tunes in and welcome to our first policy dialogue from the Department of Public Policy and Management, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Policy Dialogue is our newest program in which we will discuss the latest issues related to policies that is arranged every 2 months. In each of these webinars, we will invite academicians, researchers, practitioners, and many more that we feel to be most relevant to the topic. Before I'm going further, please do not forget to fill registration forms that will soon be distributed in the chat room, as we only deliver a certificate of this webinar to the emails from that form. Also, in the discussion or in the chat room, please remember to be respectful to others and not to make any offending or insensitive comments or questions. But other than that, we all await your full participation. Before we continue, there are some opening words from Professor Dr. Agus Pramusinto, MDA, as the head of Indonesian Association of Public Administration, which as well as the lead commissioner of Civil Service Commission for Indonesia. He is also our valuable professor to our department. And for a few minutes, the room is yours, Professor Agus Pram.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadia. Good morning, distinguished speakers, Professor Ki Hien Kwan from Sungkyun Kwan University, Korea, and my friends, Dr. Jonathan Lassa from Charles Darwin University, Northern Territory, Australia, and Professor Wahyudi Kumarutama from the Department of Public Policy and Management, UGM. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and once again, very good morning. First of all, thank you very much to you all for participating in this webinar. I think it is a good tradition for us to start our semester with a joint lecture by inviting international speakers. And today we are lucky that we have 3 speakers from Korea, Australia, and Indonesia. With Professor Kwan, we have a long collaborative work in joint teaching activity between SKKU and UGM, and it has been more than 8 years. Thank you also for giving a chance to our students to visit. And with Dr. Jonathan Lassa, he's also a good partner in joint writing. We have produced an edited volume on New Normal, which was published last year. Thank you very much for your contribution. And Professor Kumarotomo is now the chair of the Department of Public Policy and Management. I believe he can bring the department to a better condition. With such a competitive situation, we have to work hard and to manage the organization with good leadership to be more innovative in improving the department. And it is possible to let the department with an autopilot management. On behalf of the Indonesian Association for Public Administration, I am very honored to work together and would like to collaborate intensively with scholars from Korea and Australia. And we can develop joint research and publication activities to enhance our quality of researchers. Thank you very much, and Hamza Hamida. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again to Professor Dr. Agus Pramusinto. Now we're moving to our next part of our schedule. Our first policy dialogue today raises the topic, how are government adapting to an era of uncertainty? We have three speakers for today's topic, as you can see from the poster. The first one is Professor Gi-hyun Kwon from Sungkyun Kwan University in South Korea. Then we also have Professor Wahyudi Kumarotomo from Universitas Gadjah Mada in Indonesia. And last but not least, we also have Dr. Jonathan Lassa from Charles Darwin University in Australia. For each of these speakers, I represent the department to express our highest gratitude that you allow your time to have a discussion with us. Now, I will introduce you to our moderator today, Ms. Pradikna Yunik Nurhayati, SIP MPA. She is currently a lecturer in the Department of Public Policy and Management here in Universitas Gadjah Mada. She is now also a doctoral student in Department of Political Science in National Cheng Kung University in Taiwan. And prior to that, she completed her degree in public administration from University of Nottingham in United Kingdom. Her contribution to academic sphere cannot be ignored, as she has many research experiences with many related but not limited to the concern of health. With all this, without doubt, she will be a great moderator for today's discussion. Without further ado, I will hand the forum to her, and she will guide us through the discussion. Ms. Yunik, the forum is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Viola. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our policy dialogue on how our government's adapting to an era of uncertainty. My name is Pradikna Yunik Nurhayati, and you can call me Yunik. I will be your moderator in our discussions about agile and adaptive government in the time of uncertainty. So as government around the world are facing new circumstances and uncertainty risks, government is enforced to be able to adapt and adjust numerous shifting of world conditions. It requires ability to respond with the requisite tempo and efficiency. The government needs to be agile and adaptive, especially on formulating and implementing policies. Therefore, on these occasions, we will have three honorable speakers that will discuss about two examples of uncertainty in our world that we are still dealing with today. COVID-19 pandemics and climate change. It will be continued by the topic about future agenda for Indonesia. So, our first topic about COVID-19 policy response will be discussed by Professor Gi-hyun Kwon from SKKU or Sungkyun Kwan University, South Korea. Professor Kwon is a senior professor of public administrations and public policy with tremendous professionals and working experience, such as Dean of Graduate School, SKKU University, President of Korean Association for Policy Studies, consultant of e-government roadmap for developing countries such as Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Pakistan, and so on. It includes more than 20 years domestic and international experience in e-government and e-strategy. He pursued his PhD in public policy from Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, Harvard University. Professor Kwon will provide us insight about how the policy response and emergency actions in South Korea being implemented to tackle the public problems related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have also our second speakers. There will be Dr. Jonathan Lassa as a senior lecturer on emergency and disaster management, Charles Darwin University, Australia. He completed his PhD at the University of Bonn while based at United Nations University in Bonn. Completed postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Kennedy School, Cambridge, received postdoctoral research fellow position at Nanyang Technological University. His contributions to the global disasters including macro and micro level disaster governance. Dr. Lassa will discuss about how Australia's government responding to the effect of climate change that caused bushfire to their country. Last, we will have our third speaker, Professor Wahyudi Kumarotomo, as our head of Department of Public Policy and Management, Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia. Professor Kum completed his PhD at University Science Malaysia with expertise on public policy, public finance, and public budgeting. Apart from teaching at UGM, Prof. Kum was also involved on various activities with Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, German GTZ, Asian Development Bank, and attended fellowship at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, University of Geneva, Switzerland. Professor Kum will discuss about government's effort in tackling uncertainty and reflect on what the government of South Korea and Australia have done in responding emergency and uncertainty caused by COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. So every speaker will have 20 minutes and we will continue with the questions and answer sessions for more or less 30 minutes. During the Q&A sessions, participants can raise their hand, and I will allow you to unmute and ask the questions directly. Or you can write your question in English on chat column and I will read it for you. So to save time, let's just start by inviting Professor Kwon as our first speaker. Professor Kwon?
Okay.
Yeah, Professor Kwon, do you need any assistance to operate the PowerPoint for you or prefer to share screen?
We will share, okay?
Okay, Prof, time is yours.
Okay. Hello, my respectful professors, including Professor Agus and my colleagues. I am very honored and I'm very glad to be here. And I'm again, thank you very much for inviting me for this valuable and very respectful and very nice webinar actually. So the title I'm going to discuss today is that the main title is Agile and Adaptive Governance in the Time of Uncertainty. The subtitle goes like Korean Strategic Governance and Strategy to the COVID-19 crisis. So at first, I like to very briefly discuss, as you know, about the situation where we are at, namely globalization challenges and COVID-19 challenges, pandemic, challenges for the new leadership, the government leadership. So the reader should correspond to the time, speed, and uncertainty with the speed of thought and speed of action and good direction of innovation. So I like to call this kind of overall situation as a paradigm change. So as you know, we need to build up a new public administration and public policy. Why? As you know, we are facing at the first industrial revolution, including artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and big data, and bio, and COVID-19 pandemic crisis. All of these issues, in one sense, attacking us about human identity crisis. So I called it, and we called it, Age of Turbulence. So we need to build up a new public administration theory. And as you know, in our public administration, up until now, we have a first generation and second generation and third generation, as you know. The first generation is very traditional bureaucracy in the very hierarchical and very structured and very rule-based and like army style, and command and control, and you should follow me. At the second generation, you know, the new public management is like employing the business school and economics and entrepreneurship and market oriented and emphasizing about performance and incentive and competition is the key issues. At the third generation, we called it public value model or new governance, and value oriented and new governance or network governance. And we called it kind of effectiveness. But as I told you before, maybe on another webinar or another seminar, or even I did a lecture, a special lecture at the UGM. I suggest governance fourth generation and governance 4.0. What is the 4.0? I want to say three key issues: agility and speed, problem solving, and more ethical government, and fusion and integration is the three key issues. So for the ethics, we need responsive and more responsible leadership. And for the speed, we need more agile and agility and agile problem solving. And for the fusion, we need more and more integrating and humanities and social science and even natural science and engineering. We need the fusion to solve a new problem. New problem is wicked problem, like a COVID-19 pandemic or social issues and climate change. This kind of wicked problem, we need to new government leadership try to solve not only domestically, but also with the international collaborations. So I want to jump into the COVID-19 case in Korea, okay? So as you know, the Korean government response system is a central and the local government. And at the central, of course, president and prime minister is the key at the headquarters. And we called it CDC and PN government headquarters. And here, the chief minister is Ministry of Health and Welfare. Here, Minister of Interior and Safety is the co-chair person at the Korean Central Disease Control Headquarters. We called it Korean CDC, like United States has a CDC, it's called KCDC. And also at the local level, under the local government, we have a local disease control task force, including 226 local entity at the nationwide. Okay. So this is the kind of overall picture of the governance. And network and governance cooperation, I like to say about three items. First one is organizational cooperation within the central government, okay? KCDC, the main headquarters of controlling disease, cooperated with Ministry of Land and Infrastructure and Ministry of Science and ICT, set up a new management system which can effectively tracing the detailed whereabouts of those infected. So this is kind of user interface and some of the movement paths of the confirmed cases and in real time. So if, for example, if a certain one person has affected and he goes travel like this and this restaurant and this theater and this travel another city, we confirmed with a real time management with this kind of smart management system. Okay? And also maybe in Korea, I like to emphasize about voluntary cooperation from the citizen and civil society. Okay? And more than 3,000 medical practitioners and doctors have volunteered in helping Daegu and another city since the first strike of COVID-19 in Korea. and continuous civil donations come from private companies and organizations and even citizens. So what is important factor is that public and private partnership and public and private cooperation. So putting more $100 million, Korean CDC made a research network with the universities, research centers, national think tank to effectively develop vaccines and other medical responses. So these are the Korean kind of approaches. And so organizational cooperation within the government and central government and local governors and entities, and voluntary cooperation from the citizen and civil society, and finally public and private cooperation. So to fight against more effective way, Korean government imposed a mandatory, sometimes 14 days quarantine on all the passengers arriving from abroad as of April 1st. And then beginning at noon, April 13th, all inbound passengers arriving from the United States are placed under self-quarantine and must take confirmed test within 3 days. At the same time, providing a total free test to the foreigners, even though he is or she is illegal stay, if they feel some types of fever or symptoms, they are encouraged to call the number 1339. So there is no forced departure. So, and this is governance system of the Central Disease Control Headquarters. So currently, Korean situation is very kind of flattening coronavirus curve, and new confirmed cases are very quickly decreased, stabilized in Korea. And as you know, the fatality rate is one of the lowest in the world, is less than 2.3%. But as you know, the other countries, France, more than 18%, Belgium, United Kingdom, Italy, and Spain, all above 10%, let alone the United States. So one of the global evaluation is Korea is one of the best practice. UN Sustainable Development 2020 published in June 2020 evaluate South Korea as one of #1 among 33 OECD nations on the policy effectiveness on the COVID-19 crisis. The chief analyst was Professor Jeffrey Sachs at the Columbia University. He used the UN index. First one is fatality rate per 1 million. Second one is reproductive rate. How many persons are affected by one prior infected person? And thirdly, control efficiency, meaning that how much control and regulation was very effective. So based on these three index, Korea was ranked top among the 33 OECD nations. Total score is 0.990, and in Japan is 6th, and Germany is 19th, and Sweden is 22nd, USA 28th, Italy, France, England, Belgium, and lastly Spain. So many foreign newspapers allows Korean performance. For example, BBC, coronavirus in Korea and how trace, taste, and treat may be saving lives. As the coronavirus spread rapidly around the world, killing thousands and thousands and leaving governments scrambling to deal with the fallout, one country has repeatedly drawn praise for its efficiency in dealing with it, South Korea. And the Diplomat and Washington Post says that Korea's impressive management of coronavirus only strengthens its rapidly growing cultural influence around the world. But I think I like to emphasize the key point is that smart test is one of the key points in Korea. And recently there are another mutation and variant coronavirus is very serious concern, including United Kingdom and South Africa and Brazil. So within 2 months, more than 86 countries are affected. And 80% of United Kingdom new affected patients are mutation coronavirus. South Africa and Brazil mutation also very quickly spreading out in worldwide. So smart test kit with an accurate multiplex PCR is the key, I think. So confirmed rate is meaning that daily new cases divided by daily new tests. Korea is very low, like 0.69%. Israel is 14.55%. USA is 26.9% as of February 18th this year. So focusing only on vaccine is not very wise, I think. It's not very appropriate. So Israel and USA is the country only focusing on vaccine, not the test, smart test or test. So I truly believe that we need a two-track approach, one with the kind of PCR or very accurate smart test, and the other with vaccine. So we may need two, one with vaccine and one with the PCR test. So that's one of my conclusions. Overall speaking, I like to emphasize three key items. First one is in Korean case, we have a strong control center like a Korean CDC, enabled to control the related agency in the central government. And this was initiated by the lessons of MERS in 2015. And Taiwan is another case with these lessons. So Japan says that what Korean has and what Japan has not. The second one is, as I mentioned before, power of the citizen or collaboration from the civil society. And also we have a nationwide very cheap rate of insurance price because of the reform of the medical reform. So it lowered the hurdles of the hospitals and allowed the citizens at widespread and very reasonable medical price and very reasonable medical coverage. Finally, not lastly, smart infrastructure and smart governance, innovation, smart systems such as public drive-through and work-through and smart kits, and using big data and transparency opening, it allowed to tracing the patient's whereabouts. Okay? So obviously, we still have to be very careful, including Korea, because worldwide the pandemic and mutation and variant is still going on. So we never know when the second or third and fourth wave might outbreak again. So we have to be very careful. So as I said, in conclusion, in brief, we need agile governance with an effective policy capacities. So furthermore, we need a strong international collaboration to accelerating vaccine and treatment. Also, we have to set up the rules and formulations. So in conclusion, each country has different historical or cultural and geographical, context, so that there may not be one best solution. Nevertheless, the lesson here is that responsible and responsive governance with agile leadership is crucial to solve this problem. So this is a picture from the Indonesia kind of drive-through. And one of my final notes is that even at these critical times, we need to wake up and to watch the banality of evil, temptation of totalitarianism or populism, as Yuval Harari and Hannah Arendt or Snyder of Yale has warned. Using a terror psychology of the people as a ruling techniques will be the seduction of the tyranny. This is another more threatening problem in the liberal democracy. I have more slides, but I think it is wise to stop here because this is about time. So from the standpoint of saving my times, saving our seminar times, let me finish at this point, and then I will jump into the more discussion and more free Q&A sessions with our students. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kwon. It's a very insightful, and hopefully we can get the lesson from South Korea. If I can conclude or summarize a little bit about the point from Professor Kwon, dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, the government of South Korea emphasized on network and governance cooperations. It includes smart management systems, voluntary actions from civil society, and public-private cooperations. South Korea also applied stronger measures and controls such as free tests for foreigners. And there are actually three key items to handle or overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. First is a strong control tower, power of citizens, and nationwide cheap rate of insurance system, as well as smart infrastructures and smart governance, including using big data. Am I right, Professor?
Sure. It's
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Now we are continuing to our second speaker, Dr. Lasa. Dr. Lasa, already here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Do you need any assistance to share the PowerPoints or just share screen?
I think I can share screen.
Thank you. 20
No
minutes,
worries.
Professor. Time is yours.
Thank you. Right. I'll share my screen first. Right. Yeah. I hope you can see my screen by now in a full
Yes, it's clear.
screen format, right?
Yes, Dr. Lasa, it's clear.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bapak Ibu. And I would like to say hi to some of you that we haven't met before. So I'm Jonathan. I'm based in Darwin, in Australia. So at the moment, Darwin still beat the record of no death from COVID-19 and only, I think, 3 local cases. And in total, we have 100 more or less cases. And I think there is no more active cases. And that is the reason why I would like to talk about merits and challenges of decentralized disaster governance systems. And today I would like to talk about insights from Australia tradition of emergency declaration. So, so I slightly changed the topic because I think that in the political science or in the FISIP, like UGM, I think we need to discuss this more in the context of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, probably also in the Asia Pacific, because I think there is a lack of understanding about the tradition of emergency declaration. So here we are. So declaring disaster as part of public policy and decision making is actually a new concept. So if you look at the some of the global scholars on crisis leaderships like Bowen and colleagues, they said that presidents function as crisis and emergency managers is actually a new concept. In Australia, it's the prime minister, right? So, so there are existing studies regarding the evolution of the role of head of states in emergency management. So we have slightly different approach in Australia because even though both countries kind of based on federal system, but the way local disaster governance is run is totally different. So I hope you can see some of the publication that I put down here. So just in case those students who want to write their final project, this could be a topic that you can focus on. So major disaster declaration in the US context is pretty simple, but it's not that simple as you might see. So the whole point is to supplement the efforts and to allocate, mobilize resources to states, local, and local governments. That's the whole point. And the history of emergency declaration in the US context, for example, it was the Hurricane Sandy 2012 that actually marked the beginning of a new practice in declaring a major disaster in the US, where the hurricane hadn't actually made a landfall. So it was like the lead time was like 2-3 days. Obama were able to declare in advance. So without waiting for the impact, the governments can declare that there is a major crisis that can be tackled right before it actually strike. So hypothetical crisis as a basis for decision making to declare an emergency is actually a new thing even in the US context. So and that should be based on objective hypothesis that the scale, the needs, the potential impact could actually bigger if you don't do it now, if you haven't mobilized the federal asset now. So that is kind of the new stuff. Of course, there are variations in the world. In Indonesia, we made it pretty clear about the criteria, but when it comes to decision making, in the last few years before COVID, the central government seems to be very reluctant in declaring a disaster as a national disaster. While there are lots of reasoning about this, and I'll be talking about at the end of this presentation. In Australian context, I would like to share a little bit about how we declare disaster emergencies here. And so probably before that, we talk about the goals of national disaster governance system in Australia. We have nothing like BNPB or FEMA. So BNPB in Indonesia or FEMA in the US. Well, we do have Australian Emergency Management Agency at this federal level, but it's not as big as that, and it's not a kind of pool resources. It's kind of special op kind of desk. So it's not big, and it's not the setup is totally different. And the main purpose of the the Commonwealth system is to promote and maintenance counter disaster capabilities in the country, and also to coordinate assistance within the country. And then you have Australia humanitarian operation for international operation. So the national vision is not only for the domestic, but it's also for foreign aid policy from the country. And of course, the last one is to develop a core civil defense. But in actual life, in the local government level, the central government do not have the power to declare an emergency for an event that is situated at the local level, regardless of the scale. So that's not similar to what we have seen in the US or Indonesia. So there is a big debate in Australia in the last 10 years whether we need some sort of Commonwealth legislation that allow central government or Commonwealth government to play more roles in emergency management. And of course, build examples from different parts of the country. Over the last few years during my stay here in Darwin, I have asked students to write and speculate about what kind of future transformation in the policy that we need to have in the country. But of course, we have to be mindful of the fact that sometimes existing legislation might not work. How best you write that down? So I think the best way to do it could be that we train emergency responders to ask the right questions. And one of the questions is, should an emergency declaration be issued and at what scale? Are existing institutional arrangement are up to the scale or not? So that is some sort of key questions. And during COVID-19, what I have seen here is the agility, or I call here as kind of legislative resilience, where the central government were able to create, at least I checked this morning, is 52 already, but this is like in the second semester, I pick up like 50 federal legislative amendments made at national level. So this legislative resilience, I think, something that Indonesia needs to change, because for the last few years, if you look at the case of Japanese, the ability for the legislative at national level to revise disaster management legislation is quite fast, based on new learnings from new events that inform future response. But in Indonesia, the undang-undang is treated like a very sacred process. So when it comes to changes, there are a lot of things that need to be discussed, but in the end, you are not really learning from events by event. So because the cycle of changing legislation is very long, could be 5 to, it's now already almost like 14 years. While learning from new experiences, I think we need to have some sort of legislative change. So in that case, what I observe from different practice from around the globe, I think the more you have this legislative resilience, the better in your response. And that is for sure, I think. So let me share with you some of the state declaration as a key variables to an effective disaster and crisis governance, including in the context of COVID-19. So this is the regulatory architectures or network architectures of Perda Bencana in Indonesia, what you call, Perda Bencana, right? The local disaster management bill or local disaster management acts. In Indonesian, the picture is very centralized. So you have a lot of big dots there that represents central regulatory, it's like undang-undang. So the biggest one is the Undang-Undang 24, 2007, that regulates disaster management system. While in Australia, if you quote all the local acts, what you see is totally decentralized. It's not connected to any national laws. So there's no umbrella at national that unites the disaster or emergency management response system, if you want to put it like that. So what I can call from here is our model. When I say it, our is, so Indonesian model of decentralization is a little bit of very paternal, very central government centric in a way, because if you observe in the last 12 months, local government cannot deviate and build some sort of innovative decision making based on local condition. They have to listen to the central government most of the time. While they know the context better, they know how to deal with the problem better, but when it comes to decision making, it seems like the regulatory context somehow paralyze them to take different kind of pathways in decision making. Anyway, to cut things short, so there is no central or Commonwealth emergency legislation here. All are actually managed by state and local government, state and territories. And there are various practice. So one of the papers that get published this year, surprisingly, well, 3 years, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, trying to understand about the number of actual events versus the number of declarations made by local governments. You can read with this later. This is not my point. I'm just showing you about that there are pretty good records about this kind of declaration. And this is what I got it from Northern Territory governments about the unique way of declaring disasters. So, and this is based on more on public health emergency acts. So every now and then the government can declare that there is an emergency in different parts of Australia, and then we have to pay attention to how passengers from that kind of places arrive here, and we need to treat them differently in a way that we can put them in a quarantine or so on. So declaring disasters should not be made political. It can be made based on needs, objective calculation. Now, of course, it's always political when if you look at the empirical evidence. So if you look at the national level declaration in the US context, it's always political. And there are heaps of data, and this is some of the slides that I share with my students, that if you look at the scale of the events and the patterns of declaration, there is always a tendency that the government might target core state and also gray state, the floating state, what is called in the US election. So it's always political, but at least the practice of that can be improved. So there is no, you know, gesture like what we have seen in Indonesia so far. So how do we mitigate political volatility in decision making in Australia? Well, one is if you have to look at the structure of Disaster Management Act. And this is the structure that I picked it from NT and Tasmania. But overall, if you look at the most of the states, this is the typical this Emergency Management Act. So you have emergency powers and authority that is quite clear, and you have also state of emergency exercise that needs to be made, and administrative arrangement, authorities, function, and so on. You can search and have a look because what I'm going to show is probably based on two cases, South Australia and also NT. So you have in South Australia, you have three categories. One is major incident, and the second one is major emergency, and then the last one is disasters. So that is the scale of events and who is in charge. For smaller events, it's the state coordinators, usually the head of the police, and then the governor who made it. So the governor is elected by the Queen. Not why it is governor is because it is seen as less political, while the premier or the head of, like in Indonesia we call it gubernur, is very political because the way they judge the situation is full of political calculation anyway. But so this is for disaster management mainstream kind of policy. For public health, it's different setup. And in the context of NT, we have only two categories, like major emergencies and disasters. And so when it comes to the bigger scale, you need NT administrator. It's also selected by the Queen. And also on top of that, you have two ministers that represent the executive government. So that is the context. And when it comes to the space that allow local governments to declare, it is possible to declare for an event that is going to occur, or is about to occur. So you don't have to wait until it's too late to declare to mobilize assets from higher level of governance. So it's kind of no regret approach that you don't have to wait that the cyclone will exactly pass through your town. Until then you declare. That is too late, according to the Australian, learning from 40 years of cyclone events. So that's the reason why most of the legislation at the state level regulates in such a way that allow local governments to declare before an event can occur. So that is probably the background why state and territory governments can declare and close down the airports for certain sources of passengers if their origin are seen as a kind of hotspot. So I think we have to look at this as kind of using gear when you drive a car. So when you in Indonesia we call it tanjakan, when you get into the high mountain, you use different gear. When things are a little bit easy, you change the gear. So it should not be very rigid and top-down kind of approach. So local governments can exercise their authority in a more objective way. So this is still the same. I think I will just skip. I would like to show you simply about the fact that you can declare an event before it is taking place. I think it's all the same. So yeah. So let's go back to the Indonesia or maybe countries outside. In many cases, it's developing world. Well, it's probably a wrong term now. It's like middle income country or lower to middle income country. So there is a long-standing unwritten rules in disaster management communities, surprisingly, and also in the international humanitarian communities, that assume when a country declare national disaster, it equals an invitation to international aid. So, and this is still shared by many international agencies and also by many governments. So that is the reason why when most of the countries get into middle income state, like Indonesia, they are no longer easily declare a disaster as a national disaster. So because it will be seen as a kind of weak exercise of power. So what they do is they develop a paradigm, don't ask, but don't reject when you offer external aid. And for a very long time, international aid must be learning to adapt to this kind of changes. So some of them disagree with this approach, but there is not much option if that happens. But I think that is not only the problem. I think also we look at the global system at the moment. I think if you look at the pattern of declaration from countries to countries in regards to COVID-19, there is some sort of paternalism in the context of COVID-19, shared also by advanced countries. Because they cannot deal with the costs, local political costs. So what they do is they use the hands of WHO to deal with this. Is time already?
Yes, 5 minutes left.
Okay, yeah, it's almost, I think this is the last slide, yeah. Right, so here is the case, in the case of reflection. Why central government in developing world need to learn about how can we better exercise disaster declaration in the future. So the first one, not only for starting no, it's not just to jumpstart the local governments, because there is an assumption that the continuity of governing is often get what you call affected. Like in Palu in Central Sulawesi in 2018, most of the civil society, we just interviewed almost like 30 activists, including international NGOs who witnessed about the first 2 weeks, the local government did almost nothing because they were also affected. But the mayor were also quite frank that he didn't know what to do in the first place. So what we could see is that there is a need for a more systematic approach to declaring disasters, that in a way we can help jumpstarting local governments for a while. And the second one is you declare because you take it as a kind of no regret approach, because if you wait for too late, it might not be as effective as if you declare it in advance. So more rational decision making based on risk assessment, cost and benefit kind of decision making that allow you to come up with a more inclusive, but also close to, like exercise the protection imperative from the government point of view. And it is kind of the risk taking for higher goals, in this case, saving your own people in the time when it is really needed. So that is the case of disaster declaration that I think we can think about. And going back to Australia, it's quite simple. You don't have to wait from the central government to lock down your state. Of course, as I said, it's more liberal in the case of exercising the decentralization model. In our model is very paternal, and I don't know how much we can actually learn, because we have a lot of advantages in many small islands. Like I look at the small islands governance model in COVID-19. So one of the places that I look at is Rote, where I come from, my wife comes from. It has all the measures and also the thinking to isolate the island from the impact of COVID-19. But the higher level of government try to intervene, and then at the end putting the local governments in a bad position. And then, so now you have huge of local transmission, because there is uncertainty in governing COVID-19, because there is unclarity of how much, there is a big questions around decentralization in the context of crisis. How much local governments should govern on their own without being afraid of the president, and also being afraid of the governor. And the only stakeholder that they need to think about is the safety of their own communities, because these are the people who elect them in the first place, to protect them in the first place. With that, I think I'll close. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lassa. It is very interesting to find out that Australia emphasized on effective local disaster management, while in Indonesia we are focused more on centralized approach. In Australia, they emphasize on these decentralizations. It is there actually three interesting points from Dr. Lassa. First is about not only jump-starting the local government, no regret approach, and risk taking for higher goals. Thank you very much, Dr. Lassa. Now we are continue to Professor Ku. Prof. Ku, are you ready?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Time is yours.
All right. Thank you, Unique. And good afternoon, good morning to all my Indonesian fellows, but good afternoon to Professor Kwon and also Dr. Jonathan Lassa. Let me just share with you my PowerPoint, and because my internet connection is not really stable, at some point I might turn off my camera. Sorry for that. Is my voice
very good,
quite clear?
Yes, it's clear, yes. Prof.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Okay, just let me check with you whether my screen has already been shared. And
yes, Prof. We can see it.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm also changing a little bit about the topics, and I will be focusing on the problem that we are facing in Indonesia. And I will be talking about the importance of evidence, of course, because this is the way I think this is one of the major issue in Indonesia while we are dealing with the uncertainties due to the COVID-19 disaster. So I would say that this should be the best survival kit under uncertainties, but unfortunately, as we have seen later, I will also explain about the fact. But actually, I just would like to talk these 4 points. First, of course, we are talking about uncertainties under this global pandemic currently. And the fact that the Indonesian government is kind of, adapting so many approach, and it's not really clear in terms of the policy making. I will also talk about what is really happening on the ground. And then, of course, we will be talking about some of the current issues in public policy and public management. Let me start with the current situation in Indonesia. As this is the latest data that I have already just downloaded from the National COVID-19 Task Force. Well, until end of the year, until 1st of this 2021, we still see the high number of new cases, new COVID positive cases. Although currently we see this is the moving average of the cases. We see well a little bit down, but today, for example, we still have 9,039 new cases, 9,000 per day. That's still a lot. Unlike probably, as Jonathan have said, even in Darwin, no single death. In Jogja, daily it's around 10 to 15 people death because of the pandemic. So it's still pretty much worrying. But of course, we see that the curve will be starting to be flattened, but we cannot, we cannot take it for granted, of course. So complacency and leniency is not, really recommended, because this is really the problem in Indonesia. And of course, one of the problems, as I said, is that the relationship between the knowledge and policy has not really been put in place, and it's not really being used by the government. Now we see, although, as I said earlier, that the problem is the paradigm. The government, sometimes they talk about, social distancing as the key for, curbing the new cases. But at the same time, they are talking about herd immunity, and we are talking about the fact that we have already started vaccination and so on. And hopefully it will also finally beat the new number of COVID positive. But that's something that is still unclear, because the fact is not really reliable. Although in terms of the economy, if we compare with the other countries, in Europe, in Brazil, and Latin America, we see economic downturn for more than 5% minus, but Indonesia is still, it is shrunk by minus 2.17%, but it has already been impacted negatively on the population because more than 4 million people are losing jobs. And of course, the majority of the Indonesian people, if we can see from the survey on the health, they still give priority to health, public health. But the problem is that we do not know the facts or what would be the basis for making policy. And as you can see, for example, from this picture, that the next steps for curbing the cases of COVID-19 is pretty much depend on how the government and the polity, people at large, really understand what's going on and what's need to be taken in terms of precautionary, in terms of all this health protocol and so on. Let me just give you some ideas about how it has already changed everything in Indonesia in terms of the economy, how it also have an impact on the SMEs industry and so on. But this is the global phenomena. I would not explain it further. But let me just give you some ideas about what has been done by the government formally. I took this actually presentation from some of my colleagues from the central government. They have already been allocated funds for health safety net, social safety net, and economic safety net, including, of course, so much funds on national economic recovery measures. This is the basis for such kind of allocation. The government use fiscal policy approach as well as monetary policy approach to revive the economy. It seems quite well. It works, but again, it doesn't work when we talk about how we can actually control the pandemic. But if we zoom a little bit careful on what has been allocated in terms of government towards the pandemic, it's not really clear either. Let me just give you, sorry, this is still in Bahasa. This is the top 6 highest ministerial expenditure in the last 2 years and the plan in 2001. If you see here, the priority is still given to public works. Second is defense, to the Ministry of Defense. Third is the police, national police, and then social ministry. And only the 5th is allocated for the health. The question is, of course, is the government really serious on this devastating pandemic? Because we can see here that it's not even at the top of priority of the government. As we already stated earlier, the government apparently is wobbling between the 2 paradigm and 2 approach. We believe that we do not want the economy to be negatively impacted, but we also we do not know as how much the pandemic will be impacting our economy. And as we said, still Jokowi is still pushed through on the infrastructure project when we talk about the the allocation from the national budget. And at the national level, it is quite also disappointing with the fact that even the provincial and local government do not know how to change the priority against the COVID-19 pandemic. This is just an example from West Sumatra budget in 2020 that when they anticipate the pandemic, they did not change much the budget. What they did was that, okay, because we might not be able to collect money from the people in terms of from taxes and service charges, then we just cut across the board. I mean, all would be cut by, and then the revised allocation is here is 55%, without any solid argument about what to be given priority. So this is one of the weaknesses in our system when we are dealing with this national and even global scale of disaster. And if you see from the media, of course, this is one of the concern among Indonesians also, because the government keep changing about the policy towards, let's say, for example, social distancing. First, they said no travel restriction, and then second, they would say about PSBB, large-scale social distancing, and then the government saying something on the new normalcy, normal baru, adaptasi kebiasaan baru. But then the government, the central government, was protested by many governors and bupatis and mayors, and then they allow a partial lockdown. And currently, the government is agreed on what we call PPKM, pemberlakuan pembatasan kegiatan masyarakat. That's a micro scale restriction. This is the agreement that we can also see from the statement by the president himself. If it is deemed necessary, the restriction of community activities can be carried out on a micro scale, in a small scope, be it on village scale, neighborhood only. Do not carry out a total lockdown of the entire city. And we can see the argument quite logical, but the problem is that we do not have the solid basis for that argument, because we are still having a problem with these at least 5 elements that was recommended by the WHO. We need to have a high testing rate. We need to have a solid contact tracing, of course, tight biosurveillance. We need to have sufficient hospital capacity, something that is now beginning to be problematic in some cities. And we need high risk perception among the polity, among the people. But that's also is not really something that we can rely on. Okay, and this is some more about the facts. The testing rate in Indonesia is still less than 1 per 1 million, compared, let's say, a small country like Denmark with 80 per 1 million. Biosurveillance is not systematically carried out. This is probably a typical problem in developing countries, but it's pretty much depend on the government commitment actually. Lack of data accuracy due to weak biosurveillance and negative stigma on people with COVID positive cases. So this is again back to the problem of why it is happening is that because most of Indonesian policy making process is not really based on evidence. So evidence-based policy is really crucial for Indonesia because of these things, this argument. But unfortunately, this is not really happening. And let me just give you an idea about the importance. If we think, well, hopefully, in the next few months, we will be seeing the flattening curve in Indonesian new cases of COVID-19. But more importantly, we need to have data. We need to have evidence. At the same time, we need to have a more agile government, as has been also stated by the by Professor Kwon, and also probably we need to thinking about really decentralized approach on disaster management. Because let me just get back to you about this fourth point that I stated earlier. Partial lockdown in the country was, really full of, political bargaining between the central government and the provincial as well as the local government. And that's really confusing among the people because of many inconsistent and incoherent policy as a result of that kind of political negotiation. And when we talk about agility, of course, the basic idea about agility is, of course, very important. And agility, of course, can only be based on shrewd judgment, solid judgment, and if only we have the solid data. And that's still a problem. Let me give you an example. And for example, in India, currently, although in terms of GDP, India is still below Indonesian GDP, but they have been able to, quickly initiate new approach. For example, Apollo Hospital launches what they call Project Stay One, in which very quickly 500 isolation room is provided because the hotel was empty anyway. So this is kind of, a quick response that needs to be reconsidered in the next system of governance in Indonesia. And as let me just state some concluding remarks. One is that the incoherent policy and of course conflicting grand strategy have made Indonesia a laggard in the region in surviving the COVID pandemic. As I said, in Jogja, we still have experiencing kind of daily rate, probably 100 to 200, sometimes 300 new cases, while as has been clarified by Professor Kwon, there were no cases in Jeju and there were no cases in Darwin. We are still, struggling with new cases in Indonesia. And at the national level, it's about 9,000 new cases. The most critical problem, of course, is that during this pandemic, the government approach is, more or less like in many developing countries, is taking a populist anti-scientism, and that's really the problem and lack of evidence. Well, of course, with this seminar, we can actually also, my third point is that we can learn from others, but of course, it should be different. We should be differentiate between isomorphic mimicry and ventriloquism, because of course, what we need to do is really, it's fine to learn from other countries in terms of, evidence-based policy, for example. So long that we have two parallel efforts. First is that we must adapt with the situation. And of course, second, that we must allow the governments to, to really think about how such kind of things, the best experience from other countries can be really, implemented within the country. And we have to understand the context, we have to understand the culture, that's very important. And of course, the crisis has already taught us an important lesson about the need for agile governance. This is something that's still missing in Indonesia as a developing country, but we can actually learn from many best practices in Asia. Probably not many in Europe, but at least as has been presented by the initial two speakers, that we need to learn, let's say, for example, from best practices in South Korea and also in Australia. I think that's all from me. And Moderator, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kum. It is interesting because Professor Kum already straightforward. The best survival kit is evidence, right, Prof? Okay. Yeah, so pandemic has changed everything. That's why government need to do several steps or points like Professor Kom already explained. First is about the proper initial response. And the second is about the coherent policy. And then the other is about the importance of evidence-based policy, agile governance, that thinking beyond the pandemic. And of course, it's supported by the technology. Now we are turning into our questions and answer session. So for you that already have a questions, you can raise your hand and I will allow you to unmute and ask directly to our speakers. Okay, is there anyone want to ask? Wait. Okay. Wait a minute, please. I have to. Okay, there's actually one questions already. I think it's for all of the speakers. This is a question from Winnie Prastuti, student from Public Policy and Management in UGM. The question is about how the local governments possibly use local cultural wisdom in overcoming COVID, because in some areas they still think that COVID is engineered. So by design, right? Like this distrust has resulted in the failure of government efforts to prevent the COVID spread. And then the second question is about what the government should prepare regarding the possibility of another outbreak, especially in economic sectors. I think from Professor Kwon, maybe can start to answer the questions.
I didn't quite understand about the first question. Could you, our moderator, could you
yes.
say it a little bit again?
Yes, it's
what was the
emphasized.
first question?
Yes, it's emphasis on how do local governments possibly use local cultural wisdom, Prof, in overcoming COVID. So emphasize on local cultural wisdom.
For example, what kind of local wisdom in Indonesia?
I think every area in Indonesia maybe have their own local wisdom, or maybe in Korea have certain local wisdom, local cultural wisdom that can be implemented to overcome the COVID.
Okay, let me say like this, social distancing and also washing hands and cleaning and also eating Korean kimchi is one of the, when I went to the Indonesia more than 10 times, I saw that Indonesian traditional culture and food is very, I mean slow food. Not the hamburger or not the McDonald's. You guys also like the very fermented food, like taking times and very traditional. You know what I'm saying. It's very slow food, which is good for our resilience, actually, our immune system. So COVID-19 virus is also virus. Okay, so we need to fight against the virus. So maybe washing our hands and social distancing and respect the government and some trust to the government, and like a professor Kumoro Tomo, we need the trust to respect the local government, because evidence-based policy making and policy implementation is the key. So I definitely agree with Professor Kumoro Tomo. So talking about the customs, talking about the culture, talking about the local wisdoms, I believe that in Oriental system, which is different from the Europe or which is different from America, we have a long history and long tradition, and based on our grandfathers and grandmothers' wisdom. So always clean ourselves independently, washing our hand, and wisely distancing, some social distancing with other people, and respect for other people's behavior, and also diet behavior is, I think, is very important to fight against this COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, that I saw the article that in China, when the first outbreak, it is also relating with our climate change, because the first virus coming to the Wuhan at the China is already north system, because of the global warming and climate change. So this is because of a human behavior and our selfish production system or selfish economy, caused this kind of virus. So we also, in one sense, we also back to our old wisdom, traditional wisdom. Of course, we need to adaptive about the new technology, but also on the other hand, we also respect to our old wisdom. Okay, so this is for my answer. I don't know, it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Prof. But there is a second question about what the government should prepare regarding the possibility of another outbreak, Prof.
Oh, because my presentation and our Professor Lassa and Professor Wayundi already talk about many crucial and very important things. About talking about the Professor Lassa's presentation, I was thinking about Korea and South Korea, and when the Australia is very decentralized and Indonesia is very centralized, what is interesting for the South Korea is a little bit mixed picture. On the one hand, of course, South Korea is also a very centralized system, but recently I believe that local authority is very empowered. So response system to the COVID-19 or other disaster like flood or other earthquake, other disease, we gave a full kind of authority and empowered to the local entity at the field. So it is kind of centralized, but also we also respect to the decentralized decision making. And also, as I said, Professor Kumo Rotomo raised really important lessons and items, which is evidence-based policy making and policy implementation. So local government should also, maybe Indonesia, a little bit more depend on the evidence-based policy approach with agility and resilience. And also, I truly agree with Professor Wayundi about important for the experiment. So Indonesian local government should not should not follow the Australia or South Korean system. They need a little bit of flexibility and more adaptation toward their context. So otherwise it's not working. So maybe we need more policy wisdom to more flexible adaptation and flexible wisdom to customize to the local context. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. We are now moving to Dr. Lassa. How about Dr. Lassa opinion about the questions? Yeah, I'm sorry, I think it's still mute.
Yep. You need the voice, Rasa, yes.
Yeah. Yes, we can hear now.
Yes, thank you. I think the idea from Prof. Kumaro is evidence-based approach. It requires an effective decentralization decision-making model because the data is local, right? It should be empirically fit to the local context. But the problem is local capability of decision-making, crisis management remains limited. For example, I'll give you some examples. So in the initial stage of COVID-19, some of the regions, like, as I mentioned, Rote Island, that close to Australia, they tried several experiments, but this kind of experiments was not seen by the higher level as a kind of innovation. The last experiment that they did is worth noted. They tried to vaccinate the health worker first, and then after a week, they vaccinate the elite. The rest of the places that I've observed, they try to vaccinate the elite first before the nurses and health workers got vaccinated. So that is very local, and there is a um, there are many ideas to be done at the local level, including not to bring COVID-19 people to the mainstream hospital and health centers. They got this idea in the beginning, but since everywhere is kind of everywhere where practice kind of otherwise, in the end, this kind of innovation didn't sustain. So I think so there are plenty of, at least I can count like 5 to 7 people who just graduated from abroad, from different countries, going back to Rote, and they follow what is best in some other countries. So they will try to adopt that using a more evidence-based approach. But the problem is innovation at the bureaucratic level should face with the politics and the dynamics of institutional setup at the higher level. So I think we need we need a big debate about this in the context of Indonesia. And I think we need to also rewrite all the dogma about crisis leadership for local governments for the future, learning from COVID-19, learning from many disasters that we have seen in Indonesia over the last 10 years. I think it's good to go back and I think rewrite some of the models that we have so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rasa. Now we'll continue to Prof. Kum. Yes, please, Prof.
Okay. Thank you for the all the questions that was posted in the chat box. Let me just respond to a few questions that is directed to me. First, I think what has been raised by Winnie was actually talking about the fact that many local people, people at large, is really affected by hoax, by rumors, by all the thing that was raised in social media. Well, this is the way I interpret the question was, and they came to conclusion that it is engineered, it is fabricated, just like also what some people in the US also believe that it is fabricated in China and then spread to the world. That is a conspiracy theory that is going around in Indonesia, even among the people through social media. Unfortunately, the government did not really do anything adequately to prevent such kind of hoax and such kind of rumor. So the problem is really acute because we cannot trust anybody about what is really going on. And unfortunately, also the data is not available, as also raised by Professor Kwon a while ago, that we need the data, we need all the contact tracing, we need all the adequate tests, but this is not simply is not adequate in the Indonesian case. And of course, although as I also already presented from the chart, that maybe the peak has been reached, and also hopefully it would be flattened, but we still have to be alert and vigilant. This is also related to the question by Ibu Laras from TVRI, and also Ibu Prajita, that this is not the time for us to really complacent. Everybody has to be follow the protocol, wash your hand, regularly, of course, wearing masks in public places, social distancing, all the things, all the standard procedures that is actually also applied in many other countries, including still in Korea. But unfortunately, this is, of course, something that has to be, enforced by the government, and the government has to be, has to be able to, communicate better with the whole society. And let me also respond to the question by Bu Renata. Why did budget why budget did not change much? I think this is also from the mindset that our condition, although we have been experiencing this pandemic for 11 months, many of the decision makers still thinking of the business as usual, instead of, this is a kind of crisis, so that we need to move faster, and we need to reallocate the money, the public money, to certain priorities that would help the people. Of course, that we would have to prevent new cases from increasing, and also to prevent the economic impact of the whole society. But I believe that the data, the evidence is very much important, and the government should also rely on research on new data, something that is for the last 11 months it's still missing in our system of disaster management in Indonesia, especially when we talk about COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that's all from me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kom. So, okay, maybe before we continue to Professor Kom that raised his hand, we have this Shiva Akila that raised her hand in a participant who want to ask a question. Shiva, hello. Can you unmute? And Shiva Akila? No response from Shiva Akila? No?
No person.
No, I think. Okay, please. I'm sorry. Can we just unmute because she doesn't have access? Is it already? Or maybe we can continue to Professor. Oh, okay.
Audible, please?
Hello, Shiva.
Yeah, I'm audible.
Yes. I can hear you clearly. Please, your questions, please, short but before, please introduce yourself and where are you from?
Okay, my name is Shiva Akila. I'm from University of Gajah Mada. I'm the first student of Public Policy and Management. So exactly, ladies and gentlemen, also all the professor. My question is for Mr. Gihan. Well, before I deal for my question, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity that we have today. And it was a really an interesting and insightful knowledge from your presentation, Mr. Gihan. According to your presentation, I saw that Korean is really fast handling to overcome the COVID-19. And also, based on your data, smart test and the 3K item was the effective or maybe the best solution in your country. In my perspective, Indonesia as my country is not ready enough to handle this pandemic virus. At first, we didn't do lockdown like the other country do, or using masks from day one. Regulation keep changing, and as we can see, we are still struggling with lots of cases that increasing per day. My first question, Mr. Gihan, do you have any recommendation or advice to Indonesian government to overcome this pandemic? Are the 3 items or smart test is a good way to start? And is there still not late? My second question, talking about the power of citizen that you're talking before, what citizens do to help government to handle this pandemic? I assume that Korean people have a high self-discipline skill. So, Mr. Gihan, what you mind to tell me how is it going there? If we have to clean our hand using masks, we did already, and maybe the problem is we're not Korean kimchi. So that's all my question.
Okay, thank you, Shiva.
Thank you very much, Shiva, Akila, Haftis. I think your question is very, very excellent. And it's very difficult question about for the first question is that based on three key items, moral state, insurance system, and citizens' attitude and cooperation, and also government has a very powerful approach about KCDC. And also the Korea is very smart ICT country and using tracing system. It is transparent to the positive infected person. So before going to the Shifa, let me quickly address about our chatbot about local government. We need not only we need the good policy, but also we need the good humanity. I don't know your name, sorry, but it is very good sentence. So, you know, of course, we need a good decision making at the local level, but the problem is capacity and budget issues. So this kind of administrative system and administrative resources and money issues and capacity building takes time. So maybe we need also two-track approach. On the one hand, we need to keep increasing evidence-based policy making and evidence-based policy implementation and approach, and also capacity building at the local level for the truly decentralized, to realize the truly decentralized system. But on the one hand, maybe we need to run a little bit more easier system. I mean the easier policy system. So for the recommendation, I don't know about the smart infrastructure also maybe takes times, and also kind of a governance system is another issue. And about the civil society or citizens' attitude, this at least we need to emphasize about the citizen and civilian society's cooperation. So what do you think about the discipline issues? I really don't know about what things goes first at the local level at the Indonesia, even though I went there more than 10 times. You know, you know better than me. We need definitely interaction about this issue. So I gave the 3 recommendations, but for the Indonesian context, from the standpoint of Professor Kumorotomo, we need a little bit flexibility and new innovation thinking about what makes Indonesian local governance working effectively. I also need your response, including CISFA or Moderator and even Professor Kumorotomo. Okay, I also need you guys' response about this.
Okay, thank you, Professor Gihon. But before we continue, I would like to move to Dr. Lassa. Dr. Lassa, yes?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Lassa, if it is possible for me to also ask about related to this kind of decentralizations.
Sure.
Because we understand that capacity on every region or every local government in Indonesia is different, and how we deal with this kind of distributions or allocating the resources to handle this kind of crisis or disaster management.
Right, so I acknowledge the fact of the inequality of capacity, but then the risk in the context of hazards, vulnerability and risk is also different from places to places. So I think somehow we have to come up with the, I think there is a, this question is relevant to one of the questions from, I think, Pak Lele. Which one is probably better? I think when it comes to like detecting the cases like early warning system, we need a more decentralized approach because, but then it should be somehow connected to the central level. If you look at the most of the disaster governance literature up to date, the global colleagues like under the UNSDR or UNDRR they are kind of more in tune with the decentralization model, because all disasters are local and all responses are local. You talk about tracing, it's all local, and it must be done local. You cannot do local tracing from afar, right? So most of the measures are local. Social distancing are local. So we have to somehow come up with some sort of idea. So it depends on the type of institutionalism that you are using. So what I'm suggesting is hello? Yeah, so what I'm trying to argue is we need to, because I think Prof. Kwon and Prof. Kumarotomo talks about some sort of experiment. So you need to come up with new discursive model in disaster governance studies that push for new ideas. Because at this point of time, if you look at the local level governments, I think we are quite pessimistic about this, because it's hard to change the culture of paternalism. I think one of the reasons is because most of the budget coming from central government. And some of the districts, but Kumaro, please correct me if I'm wrong. Some of the PAD are actually generated by the tax of, the transaction that is basically coming from central government. So PAD is not really PAD as it's in the real sense of PAD. It's simply like you generate tax out of activities that are funded by governments, APBN, I mean. So that's the reason why they are so dependent on. So I think the change might be very small, and we cannot explain. I mean, I don't think that there will be a miracle in the next 10 years to change. But I think for the case of Indonesia, the change is very incremental. As long as we can find a little bit of small steps everywhere, that will be good enough. Because if you look at the thesis about Indonesia decentralization 20 years ago, we still kind of talking about the same things today, 20 years later. So I think the problem is pretty well known, but the issue is, in Bahasa I said, analisis jalan masuk atau problem, diagnostic is often very good, but analisis jalan keluar, the way out, you cannot go back from the way you come in. So there should be some other way arounds on how to find solution for Indonesia disaster governance. So I don't have all the answers. I think some of the answer needs to be taken seriously, and then we could think about how can we help government answer the same questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lasa. I think we are moving I think because of the time limit, we have this one last questions from Dwi Putranto. Good morning, my name is Dwi Putranto Riau. What are the government strategies and efforts that must be carried out if COVID-19 does not subside, even though it has been with restriction on micro activities and vaccine have been carried out gradually? So maybe from Professor Kwon want to respond the questions from Dwi Putranto. Yes, Prof. Kwon, I think it's still mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I said before, first of all, I like to emphasize, argue that depending only on the vaccine is not desirable, and also it's very not wise. The effectiveness of the vaccine, although it is reported, but we cannot 100% sure about group what is that, group immune system. So as I said before, we need accurate PCR or accurate test about the positive COVID-19, and at the same time a vaccine. So I don't know, with this two-track approach, if COVID-19 pandemic is not subsided, we should live with this pandemic, with this COVID-19 virus, like endemic issues, like a flu in the cold season, in the winter. There is a flu. So flu has not appeared completely, but we have to live with this flu and COVID-19. It is very sad situation. So I really personally don't want to about that kind of situation. So this is again said that not only government and local government or central government, but also our individuals, our citizens, also have to behave ourselves. I mean, also we have to do what we have to do. So it is not only the responsibility of the government. So it is common responsibility. So we all together combat against what we should do. Okay, so I think the point made by this representation has already suggested many good approaches and answers. And the question is the action, or ready to action, or ready to receive the lessons and wisdoms from the policy making. So also I don't have best answers, but that's my comment.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kon. So it's about action. Okay, maybe we can continue to Prof. Kum to respond about the question.
Well,
yeah,
I would definitely agree with Professor Kwan when he answered, respond to the question of Pak Dwi from Rio. Vaccine has already been started. Social distancing, all the measures has been already implemented. But why it's not really work effectively? Well, again, the answer is that it has to be a kind of collaborative effort among all the elements of the society. It's not only about the government policy itself, but the people in our community. We really have to oblige the health protocol, social distancing, such kind of thing that is standard, but it needs to be really appreciated and obeyed by all the people. This is very much important because the way I see it, even after vaccine, for example, there is a tendency that we are experiencing what we call seatbelt syndrome. When you are driving a car, there's a requirement that we wear a seatbelt. But when you click on your seatbelt, the tendency is that you will speed up. That's very dangerous because the danger is not whether the seatbelt is effective or not, but your behavior, your tendency to be complacent, to be disobedience to the common community, to the common standard that we need to enforce. We will not, of course, like in Singapore, when the police find people without the mask, then they will be just arrested very easily. But it will not work, of course, in Indonesia because people will be angrily against that kind of measure. But in a way, that's also something that has to be, considered by all people, because now simply the mindset is that, okay, because anyway, if we are infected by the virus, people observe that they will be recovered anyway. So people also thinking that, okay, when we are infected by the virus, it's just simply a bad luck. That is wrong. People do not know, and sometimes they do not want to know how to prevent it. That's really the problem. So this is a kind of mindset that has to be changed. Regarding, let's say, for example, the testing and tracing, contact tracing. This is very important because in many localities we found that people resist on open information about contact tracing. But we can compare with Vietnam, for example. In Vietnam, if one person is infected, then everybody in the community will know where he has already been gone, and then automatically people will help each other to trace it. But in Indonesia, we even keep the name secret. We do not know who is infected, and then people cannot really help, and then it's easily to spread because there's not enough information from the government as well as in the society. This is something that probably has to be really strengthened in the near future. And hopefully, of course, people do not, take it lightly. I mean, because this is serious, because as we also heard from other countries, even in Australia, we already heard that there's a second wave in Victoria. In England, there's a new mutant, and that's also very dangerous. So it is important that everybody, all elements of the society, really understand the fact and also the evidence, something that has to be considered, and we must move quickly and also very carefully to prevent the spread of the pandemic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Maybe our last response from Dr. Lassa.
Right. So there was a complaint from, or a question from Shiva that I think on regulation keeps changing. Well, in crisis situation, you have to be thankful that they can change regulation quite fast. The issue is whether it is effective or not and consistent or not, and what is the objective. And I think the last one that I think my response is the devil is in the details. There are many little details that are not working. So, and they kind of accumulates, and at some point, what you see is the outcomes of all these little inconsistencies. So one of the things that you need to see is local fiscal agility that can be tweaked or can be structured in a way that are responsive to crisis. If you listen to some of the head of districts, why contact tracing is not well done is simply because they were so late in negotiating budgeting for financing para relawan and pegawai to do the contact tracing. So that is coming. So that is kind of indicating that fiscal agility is not that adaptive to crisis. So and this is what we have seen in the last 11 months. The ability of provincial governments and also district and city governments in reallocating budget to speed up all the 3M, 3T is so slow. So it's like you are driving the car, but you don't know the landscape at all. So so that is the problems that I think culminate until today. So we never actually succeed in beating the first wave of COVID-19. It keeps going on, even though there is some sort of declining, but the first wave is still there. While other countries have been dealing with the fifth waves of the cases, meaning that they have been able to beat 4 times, while we we haven't been able to deal with this most of the time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Lassa. So Before we end these sessions, please let me summarize some points related to our discussions today. So from all of the three speakers already shared their opinion, their experience, and there are some points. First is about it requires agile government and effective policy capacities. So we need policy sharings, and agile leadership is also crucial. And then the second, it is also we need a requires ability such as ask the right questions. And the other side, we also have to build this legislative resilience that create new laws or amend existing laws, but in order to better serve the citizens. And then the other things is about the need for evidence-based policy. So emphasize on the evidence. Adaptation from the other countries is also necessary, but we need also to consider about the governments to experiment, to do the experiments because of this kind of local context. And then the last, my point is about it is very important to build the capacity, and it requires also a leadership that, to overcome or to handle these hard situations. That's my conclusion. I think we already run out of time. So thank you very much for joining. I will return these sessions to our MC. Viola, please.
Thank you, Ms. Unique. We're reaching to the end of our today's event. That was a very insightful discussion on how governments are adapting to this era of uncertainty. As we can see for ourselves, it's very relevant in this condition of pandemic that are still going on. According to our discussion, there are so many lessons that we can take from this discussion. And I would like to thank all of you who enriched this webinar by asking questions and giving comments, because that gives another dimension to the discussion. Once again, I would like to express my highest gratitude for all three of our speakers, Professor Gi Hyun Kwon, Professor Wahyudi Kumorotomo, and Dr. Jonathan Lasa, to be our speakers of our first ever policy dialogue. Without you all, this insightful discussion would not be possible. As a token of appreciation from us, we are following a certificate that we will send to you soon. As in here.
Thank you very much. 소라, 이거 certificate도 왔는데 이거 어떻게 하는 거야?
Oh, that's cool.
Thank you.
이런 식으로 이 사람 주는 거 있잖아.
Yeah.
이거를 프린트아웃 할 수 있나?
And we're also looking for more ways for us to later engage in the near future in any opportunities that might arise. I would like also to thank Ms. Unique, who has been a great moderator today, as well as other members of our department who are also present in this webinar. Lastly, I would like to thank each of you who registered to our first ever policy dialogue. We will send the e-certificate to your email as soon as possible. We are very glad that our idea of a discussion of policy is met with such enthusiasm. As I have mentioned before, Policy Dialogue is a program in which we discuss the latest policy issues, in which we discuss with academicians, practitioners, researchers, and others to seek more insights. It will be held bi-monthly or once every 2 months. And right now our department has now started to prepare the next one, and I hope to see all of you again in the next one. So see you everyone. Thank you very much once again. Have a good weekend. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Shukran.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Where were you,
Nice.
Gabriel? I didn't see you.
See you next time.
Yeah, of course. I'm listening to you, Professor.
Okay, take care. Take care, and thank you very much, Nadia and Wayudi and every our colleagues. You are best, and we will keep in touch with you, and we will see you soon.
Professor
Okay, bye bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Terima kasih, Pak Jo.
Thank you.
Ya, terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih. Okay.
Terima kasih.
Bye bye now. Have a good lunch.
Imanuddin College.